Okay, so if our analytics count for anything, y'all clearly don't want to hear about little mini bikes unless we're turning them into goofy ADV bikes or doing drag races from 0 to 35 miles an hour. So let's talk about a middleweight naked bike this time. Let's see here. What's one we haven't talked about? Street Triple already did that. MT09 did that one. What am I forgetting? Oh yeah, the Z900. The perfect opportunity to say something nice about Kawasaki and have everyone in the comments section tell me that I need to stop hating Kawasaki. Oh well, let's tackle Team Green's late entry into the naked bike class and see how it stacks up to a ridiculously crowded market. You know how this goes. We're going to do a deep dive on the bike, see how Kawasaki goofed it up, and then answer the ever-present question, should you buy it? And just to head those Kawi fanboys off at the pass, I am legitimately interested in riding this motorcycle and think it's a great option. So there. But before we figure out why the Z900 is a good choice, you gotta shave your nuts. You already know that Manscaped makes the best ball shavers around, but did you know that they make the perfect nose hair trimmer so you can finally cut out all those nasty nose hairs too? Seriously, it's like they just take care of your whole situation. Simply take the weed whacker in your preferred hand and jam it into your proboscis and let her rip. Note, it is suggested to use finesse when trimming your nose hairs, and Yammie Noob is not liable for injuries associated with jamming the weed whacker into your nose. It uses the same skin-safe technology as a Lawnmower 3.0, so you know it's not going to nick or tug anything. No longer will you have any boogers hanging out of your nose and disgusting everyone around you. Get yours today by clicking the link down below to use the code Yammie for 20% off your order and free shipping. Thanks to Manscaped for all their support and keeping your papa all trimmed up. Be like me. Nice and clean. Simple. Aerodynamic. 20% off. Yammie. Click the link. Now let's get our learn on. The year is 1972, and you are Kawasaki. You're a corporation. That's you. You're showing up late to the UJM parties, so what do? Do you A, make a basic inline 4 UJM like everyone else, or do you B, make an absolutely bananas motorcycle that redefines power? Well, the answer is obviously B. Say what you will about Kawi, but they always seem to be making one or two bikes that are the fever dream of some child's Mountain Dew and Monster Energy fueled fever dream. They dropped the Z900, which aside from an irritatingly confusing name, was a very, very good motorcycle. For the sake of simplicity, I'm just going to call it the Z1. When it came out, it was marketed as the most powerful Japanese 4-cylinder 4-stroke ever made. It was an air-cooled 903cc inline 4, cranking out 81 horsepower and 54 foot-pounds of torque, and weighing in at 542 pounds wet. Compared to what we have nowadays, that is slow, and I'm talking Harley-Davidson slow. The only issue was that the suspension was garbage, and that's if you're being nice, and you didn't opt for the optional second front rotor, or the brakes were more of a suggestion. Needless to say, it wasn't exactly a safe motorcycle, but that didn't stop them from making and selling about 85,000 of them over its 3-year production run. That is Ducati Scrambler numbers, my dudes. In 1976, they replaced it with the KZ900, which made a little bit more power, weighed a little less, and the brakes actually worked. It ran for a whole 1 year before being replaced with the KZ1000. The KZ1000 had a 998cc inline 4 that made 83 horsepower and weighed at 563 pounds. Yeah, gigantic leap forward this was not, but they did manage to squeeze 90 horsepower out of it for the 1978 model year dubbed the Z1R. This was considered a muscle bike back in the day and actually featured twin discs up front and a disc in the back over the usual drum brake. In 1977 and 78, it actually won the AMA Superbike Championship and featured a several-year dynasty held by Pops Yoshimura's team. Yeah, that Yoshimura. Kawi made a KZ1100R, which was a little bit quicker, but they spent most of the intervening years working on bikes like the GPZ900R and cranking out a bazillion Ninja 250s. In 1991, the Zephyr line copied a lot of the old Z1's look, but it never made a full-on comeback until 2003 with the Z1000, which featured a liquid-cooled inline 4-cylinder displacing 953 cc's and cranking out 127 horsepower and 70 foot-pounds of torque. It also had fuel injection, which was slowly becoming the standard, but not fast enough if you ask me. It was a thoroughbred street fighter, and was one of the first street bikes to have compression and rebound in separate fork legs. Over the years, it had a few changes here and there, like aesthetic special editions, ABS as standard brake upgrades, and the swap to Showas in 2014. Then in 2014, Kawi introduced the Z800, which is only slightly less powerful than the Z1000 at 113 horsepower and 61 foot-pounds of torque, out of some weird desire to enter into competition with themselves. But in 2017, they split the difference and introduced the Z900 as the flagship bike in the Z line. It used the same engine from the Z1000, but favored torque over horsepower at 125 down from 127 and 72 up from 70. It weighed in at 463 pounds wet, which doesn't make it the lightest street fighter ever, but it did feature fully adjustable suspension and a slipper clutch. It was one of the few middleweight naked bikes that was unburdened by the imprecise ride-by-wire throttles and different rider modes, favoring the basic cable-actuated throttle. We here at Yammie Noob love an analog cable-actuated throttle, baby. For 2020, the Z900 saw a massive update, getting traction control, power modes, a TFT dash, LED lights from the factory, smartphone connectivity, and SportMax Road Sport tires from the factory, all this for nearly $9,000, which meant the Z900 was here to play. However, the middleweight naked bike category is jam-packed with some of the most popular and well-made motorcycles on the planet, so let's see how the Z900 stacks up against the competition. Let's start this little series of head-to-heads with a bike we just got done talking about in a very obvious choice, the MT-09. Without boring you, the MT-09 packs an 847cc triple that makes 115 horsepower and 64 foot-pounds of torque, weighs in at 425 pounds. So it's a little less powerful, but weighs less, which means it's a little bit quicker off the line, but not by much. The MT-09 is the exact same price as the Z900, which is kind of a kick in the teeth when you consider the Z900 has way more tech and is a little less manic than the MT-09. However, you can't deny the supermoto stylings of the MT-09, which excuses a little bit of its excessively wheelie-happy nature. As much as I love the MT-09, I have to give it to the Kawi on this one since the Z900 is just better, but the triple makes a better sound than the Inline 4, so there is that. Let's stay in the big four, but this time I need you to toss on your favorite wife beater and flip-flops. Yep, it's time to talk about the Gixxis. For those of you unaware, the Gixxis is the naked bike variant of the GSX-R, and you've got two to choose from here. The 1000 compares a little bit more favorably with hyper nakeds, even if it's just a bit outgunned there, making 150 at the wheel. The Gixxis 750 makes a solid 113 horsepower out of its 749cc inline 4-cylinder engine, which is definitely a little bit less than the good old Z900. It's also missing a lot of the tech that the Z900 offers, with only traction control and ABS and a basic LED dash. It's not significantly cheaper either at $84.99, so this one's not going to be taking the middleweight throne today. Now, what about Honda? Well, it's both too big to be a middleweight at 998 cc's and too slow to compete with hyper nakeds, making only 143 horsepower and 76 foot-pounds of torque. But let's chuck the CB1000 up against the Z900 anyways. It's definitely got more under the hood than the Kawi, but when it comes to naked bikes, it's all about torque, and it really doesn't beat the Z900 by much, having only 4 foot-pounds more. It's just as heavy as the Z900, around 460 pounds wet, but the real Achilles heel of the CB1000R, and all Hondas for that matter, is the price. You need to fork over $13,000 for a bike with less features. That's just not a good value prop, so unless you're some Honda fanboy, get the Kawi. But let's turn our attention to some bikes from outside of Japan. We'll start with the Triumph Street Triple 765, and this one wins because it's a Triumph. Yes, it really does. What, you think I wasn't going to be biased? Who the heck do you think I am? But seriously, the Triumph does win here. It's making about the same power, has a bunch of different options, and while it does cost a little bit more at $9,950 for the S, $11,250 for the R, and $12,550 for the RS, you're getting a way more pulled-together motorcycle that can go from commuting to track days with basically no modifications. It's got a big TFT dash, rider modes, and a quick shifter on the RS, not to mention that classic Triumph triple sound. Sorry, Z900, but you're going to lose here. What about Team Orange? What sort of weird, goofy looking stuff are they coming up over there in Austria? Well, you've got two options. For $10,499, you can get yourself a Duke 790, which has all the crazy styling of the Super Duke, but with a more streetable 799cc parallel twin, putting out 105 horses and 64 foot-pounds of torque. Sure, that's a little less than the Z900, but it does weigh a featherweight 414 pounds with all the fit and finish you'd expect from a premium Euro bike. It does lack adjustability in the suspension, but from the factory, it's tuned pretty well. This one has to go to the Z900 on price alone, but what about the 890? Well, that one's got a bigger 889cc parallel twin, putting down 119 horsepower and 79 foot-pounds of torque, cornering ABS, traction control, rider modes, fully adjustable suspension, and that spicy firing order, which makes it sound mean as hell. You're going to pay a premium of $12,439 for all the goodies, but like a Triumph, it is worth all the extra money. We're going to go ahead and give it to the KTM for this one, unless you really are valuing that value prop. I'd love to include the Harley-Davidson Bronx here, but the specs aren't confirmed yet, and neither is the price, so let's just not even talk about it. That makes the Z900 the best middleweight from Japan and the cheapest middleweight when compared to European options. At the end of the day, I think it's safe to call the Z900 the king of the middleweight category because a price-conscious consumer is definitely going to take it over the Triple and the Duke. So there you go, Kawi fanboys. Another bike from a beloved manufacturer that I like. Feel free to keep telling me that I hate Kawasaki's though. So, now you've run out and bought a Z900, feeling vindication that some dude on the internet said the bike was good, what issues can you run into? Well, unlike the NT09, the Z900 isn't so bulletproof. Some owners have reported clunky gear changes or shifts that aren't as smooth as they should be, and neutral being tough to find. Neutral being hard to find? Hop on a Ducati, my guy. But anyway, some people have seen this issue go away with an oil change, but it could just be excessive clutch free play, so be sure to check that lever. There's also been reports of the bike running hotter than it should. Most people have solved this with a coolant flush, but you could also try running lower octane gas. Corollary to the heat is a tendency for the bike to idle too low and die. This could be caused by faulty injectors or a bad fuel pump, which is a hefty repair. Finally, there were a pair of recalls on the rear brakes, where the wire could potentially come in contact with the wheel and on the rear shock, but that one was a little bit rarer. So that's the Z900, a very good middleweight naked with lots of great tech, and unlike most other bikes in the category, it has a lot of history behind it. If you're in the market, you could do a whole lot worse than a Z900.
Well, howdy partner, how's it going? Now this video's over, but I'll tell you what, you click on this one right over here, you can keep watching yourself some Yammie Noob. Now if y'all didn't know, we're based out of Austin, Texas, so click on that video, you might check out something cool.